what it looks like behind the scenes at the Power Performances presented by Courtyard by Marriott. That's what it looks like, although they were pretty tame right now. Usually there's some hitting, some fighting, some screaming, maybe a little touching, a little pat on the back, little bunny ears, all that stuff goes on here at CBS Sportsline. Hey, how are you? Jason Horowitz, glad you could join us on the Power Performances presented by Courtyard by Marriott. In case you're wondering, the sandwich of this week, we'll go salami on Kaiser roll, a little mustard, a little Russian, something along those lines. Somebody wanted ham on Kaiser roll. Those two, they just don't go together. Anyway, in case you're wondering, Ian Eagle not here today, so no witty banter. Instead, just a quick little history lesson. Best of times, worst of times. Charles Dickens, he was born today, 195 years ago. So you got David Copperfield because of that. You get the Tale of Two Cities and all of that stuff as well. All right, we're going to talk a lot of Super Bowl here today. And we're also going to talk, we'll talk some college basketball as well and then do a wrap-up of the NFL season. But let's get to what's on the table here today on the Power Performances presented by Courtyard by Marriott. Peyton's party, obviously, you know we're talking about Peyton Manning, just because I couldn't think of another guy who started with the first name of Peyton. The Wolfpack attack. Gale gallops again. Normally, this is Ian's job. He does this much better. The NFL wrap-up, and we'll also talk with NFL insider Charlie Casserly. He was at the Super Bowl all week. He's spent many a time at Super Bowls. He has won a Super Bowl before, so we'll get his perspective 3 days after the event as well. But let's just start with the Super Bowl. And everybody wants to talk about Peyton Manning, you know, the job he's done. People have talked about Tony Dungy. People have talked about the running back situation. But that's where I want to start today, with the running back situation, because a lot of credit was given. A lot of people thought maybe Joseph Adai, Dominic Rhodes should have been the co-MVPs. After all, the guys got 264 yards by the end of the night combined on 41 touches. Rhodes over 100 yards on the ground. Adai, an NFL Super Bowl record with 10 receptions out of the backfield. I wouldn't have had any problem giving the MVP to those guys. Here's my problem with you if you would have given the MVP to those guys. It was Peyton Manning calling the shots. It was Peyton Manning controlling the game. But let's just back up a little bit here, because people thought you couldn't run on the Bears defense all season long. Well, guess what, folks? People who thought that weren't actually watching the Bears on film. In 5 of their last 10 regular season games, Bears defense gave up over 100 yards at least on the ground. In the game against Seattle, they gave up over 120 yards on the ground. Remember the game against the Dolphins when they lost at home? Ronnie Brown had a field day against that Bears defense, and that was before Tommy Harris went out. So yes, the injury to Tommy Harris was huge. The injury to Mike Brown was huge. That Bears rush defense was not as good as everybody says it was. Yes, they stopped New Orleans, but they didn't stop Seattle the week before that. And in a muddy field, when that Colts offensive line, it was more physical. It's been made about, they've talked about it, we've talked about it, everybody's talked about it. It's been 3 days since the Super Bowl was over. It's been talked about plenty. But one thing here, just to point out, if they would have gotten the MVP, the running backs that is, they would have joined the likes Terrell Davis, Emmitt Smith, Otis Anderson, Marcus Allen, Franco Harris, Larry Zonka. Those are the MVPs that won it from the running back position. Joseph Adai, Dominic Rhodes, the names don't fit in there, but they certainly had performances that would fit the performances of the running back MVPs of the past. But the question, though, that remains, will they be a duo next year? That is a question that we won't know for some time. Dominic Rhodes is a free agent, but they did go out and get Joseph Adai. By the way, how bad does Edgerrin James feel now? He took the money, left for the desert. His team was terrible. His ex-team won the Super Bowl. How about the defense? Let's revisit what everybody's already talked about again, but it is the Power Performances, so we are revisiting the Super Bowl. And a lot was made about Bob Sanders coming back, and rightfully so. Bob Sanders, big performance. The better backfield was the Indianapolis defensive backfield. Much better than the Chicago backfield. They gave up 111 total yards on the ground. But the Indianapolis secondary was tremendous, and a huge reason that the Bears could not run the football. Yes, the front seven and Booger McFarland played much better than the Bears' offensive line did. But Bob Sanders and that team, when he came back, it was a spiritual lift, it was an emotional lift, it was a physical lift. Bob Sanders, he had the interception, but the guy from Iowa, the small man, 5'8", maybe 5'9", 200, look at him, he's shorter than the referee. He had an interception, but he also made 17 tackles this postseason, and this is a guy that's been injured all year. First defense in NFL history to finish last in rush defense in the regular season and win the Super Bowl. And how about that man, Kelvin Hayden? What about a time for your first career interception? Happens in the Super Bowl. You take it back for a touchdown. But this is my favorite story about Calvin Hayden that has come out of the Super Bowl. It was written about the day after. He grew up in Chicago. A couple of years went to Joliet Community College, which is right outside of Chicago for people not familiar with the Windy City area. Then 2 years went to Illinois. Played under Ron Turner, who, if you're not familiar with, is the Bears offensive coordinator, but at the time he was the Illinois head coach. After the game, Calvin Hayden said he's going to go back to being a Bears fan. Why not? He said it's just in his blood. It's in his mind. He's a Bears fan. On that day, Bears fans are not fans of Calvin Hayden, and he came out of anonymity to have a touchdown in the Super Bowl and really seal the deal and take the game away from Rex Grossman and Chicago offense. By the way, it was a terrible pass, but you've seen it by now. And then we get to Peyton Manning. You know we were going to get to it eventually. You know we would get to him as a power performance. After all, he is the 21st quarterback in NFL history to be named Super Bowl MVP. Was his performance deserving? Well, maybe, maybe not. He had a touchdown after the first drive, which he threw an interception on. He settled down. Those numbers, 25 of 38, 66%, 247 yards and a touchdown. But it's not that made Peyton Manning the MVP. It was the intangibles, the calling the plays at the line, the making sure the Colts got first downs, 8 of 18 on third down. The fact that he knew his team could run the football on the Bears. They had more running plays. You want to talk about balance? This team ran the ball 42 times. He had 38 passes. He was sacked once, so there you go. There's 81 plays. 81 plays, the Bears had 48. 38 minutes on the field. It's always said the way to beat the Colts is to keep the ball away from them. Indianapolis had the ball for 38 minutes. We'll take a look at the list of MVPs that Peyton Manning joins from Miami. As far as the quarterback position, you got Joe Montana. You got Steve Young. You have John Elway. Bart Starr won an MVP in Miami. Joe Namath won an MVP in Miami. Terry Bradshaw won an MVP in Miami. And, of course, John Elway's final game in his career, his second Super Bowl, he won an MVP in Miami. There you see the entire list of Super Bowl MVPs that have come from the quarterback position. Peyton Manning, well deserving of it. But, you know, the most impressive part about Peyton Manning, and you knew it was going to happen, he gave it to his team. He gave it to the credit to Tony Dungy, who was well deserving of it. But look at that. That picture says it all. Guys, let's hold it on there for a sec. That picture says it all. That is what Peyton Manning does. He calls out plays. He stands over the line. He's pointing out things. There is not one guy in the NFL that knows more about the game, at least that's on the field, than Peyton Manning. And that picture says it all. That is why he is your Super Bowl 41 MVP. That is why he has a power performance here today on the Power Performances presented by Courtyard by Marriott. Don't forget, 646-CBS-1000, 646-227-1000. We'll have Charlie Casserly later on in the show to break down the Super Bowl and as well, you know, get the final wrap-up of the NFL season. We got a good wrap-up in case you forgot anything coming up at the end of the show. But let's move ahead a little bit to college basketball and maybe jumping on the bandwagon a little bit, even though I've been on this team since last year because I was a big fan of Billy Gillispie when he took over Texas A&M, now in his third season in College Station, Texas. And now I understand I may be jumping on the bandwagon as we get to the Aggies here. But I'm going to say I'm not because this team is tremendous, folks. Other than Florida, I do not think there is a team in college basketball that has a better inside-outside combination of experience and talent than the Aggies. And that's saying a lot because 4 seasons ago, so Billy Gillespie's in his third year, 4 seasons ago, this team went 0-16 in conference play. They are now 20-3 overall. In my poll, well, I don't have a vote, but I had a poll earlier this week that was released. I had Texas A&M number 3, only behind Florida, only behind UCLA. Because of that experience, let's just put this into perspective. This weekend, they went to Kansas, kept getting down. They were down 10, they were down 8, they cut it to 2, they were down 8 again. They refused to lose, and Texas A&M became the first team from the Big 12 South. You know the conference. In basketball, it's just one conference, but if you take the schools, the North and the South, like they have in football, first team from the schools, from the 6 schools from the Big 12 South, that includes Texas, A&M, Texas Tech, Baylor, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, first school to win at Frog Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas since the Big 12 formed in 1996. There had been 31 tries before, all losses. Texas A&M went there and won. And then on Monday, just 2 days later, 24 hours later, they beat Kevin Durant and Texas at home. Texas A&M running away with the Big 12 right now. And in my opinion, other than Florida, the best inside-outside combination. AC Law the fourth, Joseph Jones. Those guys are tremendous. And don't forget, they were one shot away from beating LSU and making to the Sweet 16 last year as a 12 seed, which would have been a huge surprise. So don't be surprised about them. How about NC State? Another team that, well, all right, you win some, you lose some. And they had a big week last week. And then, of course, last night they went out and lost to Georgia Tech. But when we made this show, NC State was a power performance. At home, so it kind of takes away from it a little bit. But the Wolfpack went out and beat North Carolina. Now, you got to remember what NC State has this year, which isn't a lot. They have a first-year coach, which a lot of people questioned, in Sidney Lowe. When he was a point guard for NC State, he beat North Carolina all the time. As a coach, his team is struggling. They're 3-6 in the ACC after last night's loss to Georgia Tech. They're 13-9 overall. But they played a lot of this season without Ingen Atzur, one of their only experienced players on the team. And to beat North Carolina, I know it's a team that doesn't have a lot of experience either. But to go out and beat North Carolina after winning at Virginia Tech, another one of the top teams in the ACC this year, which is a surprise of its own. We've talked about them here before. It says a lot. It says a lot about character. It says a lot about your coach. And it's his first big win at NC State. They shot 8 of 15 from beyond the arc and 61% from the floor. Big reason why the Wolfpack were able to beat UNC despite 21 turnovers. And we got to go to one other power performance here today, and it's something that's surprising, something we haven't done so far in the lifetime of this show here, presented by Courtyard by Marriott. And I definitely want to get your phone calls in on this one. You may not know that much about track and field. You may not know that much about the sport, and I got to be honest, up until last week, I had never heard of the Millrose Games, and in case you haven't either, it's the most historic indoor track and field event in the country, definitely, but maybe even in the world. It's an indoor event that's held at Madison Square Garden, and last Friday it was the 100th edition of the Millrose Games. And Gail Devers, I know you know the name. Do you know her story? But Gail Devers, at the age of 40, won the 60-meter hurdles at the Millrose Games. She was .12 off the record that she set in 2003, the American record for the 60-meter hurdles. You know the name because she won the gold medal in '92 in Spain. She won the gold medal. That was for the 100-meter dash, so she was the world's fastest woman. She won it in '96 in Atlanta, and she also was part of the gold medal 4x100-meter relay team in Atlanta as well. But let's go back a little bit and talk about Gail Devers here for a sec, because Gail Devers is a woman that right before the games in 1988 in Seoul, Korea, she was diagnosed with Graves' disease, and that's a disease that attacks the thyroid. She had all kinds of problems with her feet. Doctors thought in 1990 they may have to amputate both of her feet. This is a woman that has won 3 Olympic gold medals, and now at the age of 40 she's a 60-meter hurdle champion in the Millrose Games. She took all of 2006 off to have a child, who I actually saw last week in an interview. Very cute child. Talk about her puppy. I don't remember what the dog's name, but that has nothing to do with the story. Gail Devers, what do most 40-year-old women do? They're having kids like Gail Devers is doing. They're top of their careers. They've reached the apex of their career. They're doing well in the workforce. Well, why not run just as fast as anybody else? If you can train that hard, if you can be as strong as she is, you might as well go out and give it a shot. And she did. And our hats off to Miss Devers there, having a kid and to winning the 60-meter hurdles at the Millrose Games. And hey, you know what? She wants to go out on top. Why not try out for the Olympics in 2008? They're in China. Give it a shot. Why not? All right, folks, there you have it. Our 6 power performances presented by Courtyard by Marriott. 646-CBS-1000, 646-227-1000. Don't forget, it's Salami on Kaiser Roll Day here at CBS Sportsline. When we come back, we're going to relive the Super Bowl a little bit more. Charlie Casserly, he was there all week. He's on the other end of this commercial break. We'll see you in about 30 seconds.